Streaming and serving out of Fayetteville, Georgia, you are listening to the New Vision Church podcast, a community to belong, be loved, and believe. Let's check out today's message.
But last week, George spoke about being a people planter. And so we weren't necessarily in a sermon series about that, but I was like, well, I got to have something, so we'll make it a series, and we'll continue being people planters this week. But before I even get to any of that, I just need to go ahead and do what the people want. They've been asking me, and here are some pictures of my little girl. Had to show off those giant eyelashes in that corner one there. She's a sweet one. She's at home with Jessie right now. She's probably doing her vest. She's got cystic fibrosis, and we just got her a vest that will vibrate and shake to help break up the mucus in her lungs. And all the people in the CF Foundation have told us horror stories about how once you're eligible for it, sometimes it takes months to get it. We were eligible on a Tuesday, and we got it on the Saturday afterwards. And so we were just so, And then another shout of praise, when she was born, they said that she was in the 50th percentile as far as her weight goes, which is pretty good. And it's kind of funny, as soon as you're born, you're instantly being compared. But it's a good thing for babies, so you can kind of see where their health lies. Within 2 weeks, she dropped down to being only in the 6th percentile, because we had a diagnosis that wasn't diagnosed yet, and she was losing weight, and we couldn't feed her. We had to give her food with syringes. And now, thanks to God, and thanks to prayer, and thanks to medicine, she's in the 69th percentile. So, just have to shout a little praise for my girl. That middle one, she's eating blackberries, and she's super messy. I felt like that was fit to put in today, because today we're talking about some messy topics, some things that are a little bit dirty. You can go to the next slide. We're talking about being a people planter. And so the things that God calls us to do, if God is the true gardener, and he talks about, we talk about being a people planter, and we talk about being a fisher of men, we talk about being a shepherd. None of those are clean jobs. Those are all dirty jobs. And so, I was trying to figure out what I was going to talk about, and I had a good bit. I had a ton of notes just sprinkled into, a bunch of randomness. And then last week, I was supposed to do the benediction, and I had a parable come to mind when George was talking. And I had this thought in my head that I was like, ooh, this is almost too good. Maybe I shouldn't say it after service. I was like, maybe I'll save it. And then I was like, no, I can't do that. I'm being told to say this right now, so I'm going to say it. And then my benediction got skipped over, and George did the prayer instead, which was good. It was more natural that way. We were praying for the team. But I was like, okay, God, that was my answer. I was wrestling with, should I hold this selfishly, or should I use it? And then, God was like, no, I think you should save it next week. So we haven't done this in a while, but if you want to stand for the reading of the word, if you're able. And we will begin with this small little parable that can sometimes be forgotten. And it's Luke 13, 6 through 9. And it says, "And he began telling the parable. A man had a fig tree which had been planted in his vineyard. And he came looking for fruit on it, and he did not find any. And he said to the vineyard keeper, 'Look, for 3 years I have come looking for fruit on this fig tree without finding any. Just cut it down. Why does it even use up the ground?' But the vine dresser answered, and he said, 'Sir, leave it alone for this year too, until I dig around it, until I put in fertilizer. And if it bears fruit next year, fine, but if not, cut it down.'" Luke 13, 6 through 9. You may be seated. So it's one of Jesus' parables. It's another one about a fig tree. A lesson learned here is, if you're going to grow fig trees, they got to do well, because there's so many stories with them in the Bible. When you talk about trees in the Bible are the third most talked about living thing outside of God and people. So even though all the animal sacrifices, trees play an important role. And a lot of times they're kind of synonymous with who we are. And so what does this mean when we look at this passage? Well, first I want to say that God is the master gardener. God is the master gardener. He knows how to plant, he knows when to reap, when to sow, and he knows how to guide us in our lives. But another lesson I want to pick out in this verse is that he gives second chances. that the owner was ready to just get rid of this tree. He said, I've been coming to this tree every time and it's not growing anything. Please just get rid of it. And yet he is given a second chance to say, here, give me one more year. Maybe then we can produce something. And then he wants to make sure that the plant is healthy. So he looks at it, and the lesson here is that good roots produce good fruits. Good roots produce good fruits. I've got some pepper plants at home. I always grow some pepper plants every year. One, because I can grow them. Any other vegetable, any other thing we try, it's just like animals get to it, they die, it gets hot, there's not enough bees to pollinate. There's always some kind of excuse. Pepper plants always work. And so I always do that. And so this year, I did have 2 that just died. And I was like, what gives? Like, they were good-looking ones. They were pretty big. The one that produced was the smallest plant of them all. And so even though that it was small, it still had good enough roots that it was still able to produce something. And so we can't be caught up in just what things look like. We have to look at what it's producing. As we dig into this verse today, into this passage of this parable, I want to focus on the King James Version. Every year when I read the Bible, I read it in a different translation because it helps work my mind. And in the King James Version, those that know already know that it says, in answering, he said unto him, let it alone this year till I dig about it and dung it. Until I dig it and dung it. That's what we're talking about today. So this first section, we're going to talk about digging it. Digging it. So we've got to lay the groundwork a little bit first. And when we talk about digging is pretty uncomfortable. When we talk about digging, it's important when it comes to growing a plant, right? Is anyone watching the World Cup? Yeah, I'm going to be I'm just going to feel so lost this week once the final game's over today. Because it's just all going to be over with. I've been used to watch. It's amazing that the sermons even come about because I've been watching every game. But, because we were here in America, we were also in Canada, and we were also in Mexico, and we had all these different locations. They wanted to make sure that all of these fields felt like they were the same field. And so the FIFA came up with this plan where they made a special type of seed to grow the sod. They didn't want to use any fake turf because people get injured on it. So they came in with a specific blend of seed. They grew the grass on plastic so that it could be rolled up and transported into the stadiums. And then for some of these arenas, they had giant UV lights that would come in and hover over the grass to make sure it would grow. They also would stitch synthetic fibers into the base of the grass to make sure that it was like a rebar for the natural grass so that it wouldn't move around because, it's on plastic. It's not actually in the ground. Once installed, they would then monitor it constantly. They would probe it for moisture. They would aerate it to feed it oxygen to the roots and prolong its life. They would even mow it. I guess it was still growing, just a finite amount, but they were like, we've got to keep it perfect. So they would still keep mowing the grass. They would also test it they would shoot soccer balls at it at 17 degrees at 50 miles an hour over and over again to see how it bounces. To prove how the grass is working. A lesson with it is that they needed to make sure that it could survive a downpour of rain, but that it wouldn't dry out. But it also had to stay firm enough to play fast, but not too firm to where it would hurt players. So they had to find this perfect blend of grass. There's a picture of the UV lights on the grass, of all the work that goes into just having a field for soccer. Now, if you're not good at sports, maybe you're just not playing on the right grass. Maybe that's the lesson here. But I want to say that even though it looked so good, even though they did so many tests, if you were to dig into it, you would just find plastic. If you were to dig into it, you would just find these synthetic fibers that were trying to hold it together, that if we kept it there for years on end, it would not continue to look like it does. It wouldn't survive because it wouldn't have any more dirt underneath there. It wouldn't have anything to dig itself into. The reality here is that you can't dig into a fake plant. If I take a fake potted plant and I want to dig into it and see what the bottom looks like, I'm not going to find anything. It's going to be like, is it cake, where you're just like trying to slice it open? It's not real. And so you can't dig into a fake plant. So when we are asking God to dig into our lives and to search us, it requires a level of honesty and authenticity and a level of saying, God, here I am, my true self. Richard J. Foster says this, superficiality is the curse of our age. The doctrine of instant satisfaction is a primary spiritual problem. The desperate need today is not for a greater number of intelligent people or gifted people. We have plenty of those, but what we need are deep people. We need deep people, that they're all shallow. And so we want to make sure that we are going to be deep people. And when we're trying to be deep, we need to make sure that our roots are deep in the correct place. We need to make sure that they're in with God, that letting God dig into our heart requires honesty and vulnerability. It takes a lot to go to God and say, okay, God, please just tell me what I need to do. Look into me and find all of the errors that I need to get rid of. Find the rocks that are stopping my roots from growing. Digging can feel disruptive, yet it prepares us to grow. When you've got a nice garden and you're trying to plant something, you have to make a little mess first, right? When you're making a mess, you've got to come in and you've got to dig out a spot, you've got to mark it, you've got to replace the dirt. You're probably not going to be perfect. There's probably going to be little specks of dirt somewhere unless you're like grabbing every tiny little piece. And so it might ruin your perfect looking garden, but it's necessary in order to have the plant there. And so sometimes things in our life is getting uprooted. Sometimes objects in our life are being taken away so that we can grow. If your roots are forgotten, then your fruits will be rotten. Is this quote. If your roots are forgotten, then your fruits will be rotten. If we forget about what we're holding our lives into, that we're just focusing on God, if we forget about all of that, then we're going to start growing towards a different thing. You look at plants, there's so many plants that they tend to grow towards the sun, and we need to be a body of believers that are growing towards the sun, that we are going after him to go after what we truly need. G.K. Chesterton said this, and the more I considered Christianity, the more I found that while it had established a rule and order, the chief aim of that order was to give room for good things to run wild. I love that phrase, for good things to run wild. See, we sometimes think when we're looking at the Bible and we're looking at the things that God has told us to do, we start focusing on all the things that we're told not to do. We start focusing on all the negative things, all the stuff like we can't do that, we can't do this, and we start feeling like we're just in a potted plant, that we've got walls all the way around us and we can't get out. But God says, no, you're supposed to be like a tree planted by rivers of water, that there is plenty of room for you to run wild, plenty of room for you to be with me and to grow further out, that there is more to this story than just being in a potted plant. Psalm 139 says this, search me, God, and know my heart. Put me to the test and know my anxious thoughts, and see if there's any hurtful way in me, and lead me in the everlasting way. Search me, God. This is like a call. This is a cry. It's hard to read this verse and just say it nonchalantly. Do you realize what this is asking? That you're asking God, the maker of heaven and earth, to look into your innermost being and examine your life. We don't even do that with other people. We don't even do that with people that we can converse with like perfectly. And so we're going to God who is above all, who has the ability to do all, and we're saying, God, search me. I want you to know what's wrong with me. I want you to know my anxiety. I want you to know what's affecting me. See if there's anything hurtful in me and get rid of it. Because that's the only way that you can be led into this everlasting way, is if you remove those things. J.C. Ryle says this, fear not because your prayer is stammering and your words are feeble and your language is poor. Jesus can understand you. When we're asking God all these things, sometimes we don't know how to ask him. I listened to a message the other day, and the pastor was talking about how someone was talking to him, and the guy was like, oh man, I would just love to be in the room when you're praying to God. And that pastor was like, no, you wouldn't, because I don't really know how to pray. He was like, I get up here and talk, but when I pray, I fall asleep, I get distracted, I have 1,000 thoughts going through my mind, and I think many of us are that same way, and we think we don't really know how to articulate the words to ask God what we even know what to ask for. And it doesn't matter, because Jesus knows who we are. He understands us. Even when our language is poor, even when our words are feeble, even when we can't quite get it out, he understands us. And so when we need to just let him understand us, let him dig into our lives, that we have to make sure that we have this relationship with him to do so. See, Jesus cares more about the relationship with you than he does about the things you can do for him. You should do things for God, but it is very easy to do things for God and not actually know God. Because God is all about love and all of these great things, and we can serve people, we can love people, we can help people, we can do those things without knowing Jesus. We have to have a relationship with him, and when we have a relationship with him, that tends to cause us to do more things for him. But we need to make sure that we actually know him, that he cares more about knowing us than he does about us doing things for him. That doing something for someone doesn't create intimacy. You have to know the person. Many of you know that I used to work in some of the movies and stuff. And so, there's this concept of 5 degrees of Kevin Bacon. So it's like every actor is however many people away from Kevin Bacon. They either worked with him, and then they worked with that person, then worked with that person. So I worked with Kevin Bacon one time. So that means I'm 1 degree Kevin Bacon. All of you are now 2 degrees Kevin Bacon. I could not go to Kevin Bacon's house, say, hey, what's up, man? And then be like, hey, can I come in for dinner? He's going to be like, I don't even remember you. He's like, I don't know you. And it's like, just because I worked with him and I did things for him, talked to him a couple of times, doesn't mean I have a relationship with him. I'm going to be like, but Kevin, please, just let me in the door. I'm 1%, 1 degree. And he's going to be like, well, I'm 0 degrees. I am Kevin Bacon. Please, just leave. I'm calling the cops. And so when we're talking about having a relationship with someone, we have to know them. We can't just know about them. We can't just be in the same room with them. We have to actually know them. And I think historically we've had this issue in our lives. When you look at the Bible, there's so many times where the Israelites, they have God guiding them personally. The God there is present. And yet, what do? They say, no, we want a king. We want someone else to talk to God and tell us what to do. We can't do that. And so I think a lot of times we want people to mediate for us. We want that other thing because to be in the presence of God means to change. That if someone else is conversing with God and telling us what to do, then, we have a little bit of a layer here. We've got a little bit of a buffer. But if we are going to God and we are in the presence of God, that is going to require us to change. You have no choice. Psalm 62:8 says this, trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts before him. God is a refuge for us. Trust in him at all times. That's a hard thing to do. We don't trust in anything at all times. And yet, we have got to trust in God at all times. We have to pour our hearts before him. We have to have this level of honesty and intimacy where we just let God dig in and see how good our roots are. See what we've attached ourselves to. And that we've got to let God be a refuge for us. If God is a refuge for us, then that means we are completely trusting in him. We are letting him protect us. We are letting him surround us. That we have to actually know him. You see, when we talk about the fig trees and we talk about digging, we have to know that digging reveals the health. I went in a different kind of direction when I was preparing for this, and I did a lot of reading, did a lot of listening, but this time I did that, but then I also I started reading gardening blogs and listening to some gardening podcasts, because I was like, well, we're talking about the fig tree, we're talking about roots, let me get into that mindset. And which is just kind of funny to me, because one of the podcasts, there's 2 guys talking, and the other guy's like, so when did you get interested in figs? And I'm like, what kind of question is that? Interested in figs, And it was true, though. He was just talking all this stuff about the amazement of figs. And so a few things I learned, I don't even like figs, but a few things I learned is that most fig trees purchased are grafted or grown from another. So you can do them from seed, but they are so easy to just cut off a piece that actually some people use fig trees as a way to teach people how to graft and how to propagate, because you can just get a little piece and put it somewhere and it will continue to grow. And when you do that, it actually kind speeds up the process, where fig trees typically produce fruit within 2 to 3 years when planted from a potted nursery stock. If you're growing from a cutting, they can sometimes fruit within their first growing season. And I thought, wow, because if we're saying it can be that quick, then that means that this owner of the vineyard is right on schedule. He says, look, I know that the fig trees can produce between 2 to 3 years. This is my 3rd year here. Where is the fruit? It seems crazy to me, because I know there's a lot of fruit trees where it's like they only produce every other year, it takes time, there's all these different excuses. But this one, there's really no excuse. So digging in, you've got to reveal the health and figure out, okay, well, what's wrong? Because we know that this tree is supposed to be doing what it should do, and it's not. So what's going wrong? And I think that's how it is in our lives. A few other things about fig trees is that they were often planted in vineyards for multiple reasons. So I listened to one pastor claim that it wouldn't be in a vineyard because that would only be for the grapes. They would put fig trees on the outside. And I was like, I don't know. That doesn't really sound right to me. Usually you put them everywhere. And so I started looking a little bit more, and it was actually the opposite, that there's multiple reasons why you would put a fig tree in your vineyard. One is because they could grow figs, and you could have figs and grapes. 2, they also allow vines to grow over them. So if you were really tight on space and you were tired of putting up all of your stakes for your grapes for your wine, you could sometimes let them kind of crawl over the fig tree as well, and so you would get figs and grapes on top of each other. Also, they have an aggressive root system which helps them survive in the most hospitable areas. I listened to a guy that lives in a Mediterranean climate, and he joked about his fig trees, saying that they grow like weeds. And I was like, man, that must be nice. I've got so many weeds in my yard right now. If they were just all fruit, like that would be so great. But finally, I think what's the most important here is that the wine growers would use the figs as an ancient test to see if the soil was any good. That they would check to see if the soil was any good. That if they could look in and see how well the fig tree was doing, then they know that they can spend more money on all their grapes and plant them there. Before they waste all their resources with setting up a whole full vineyard, they can wait and they can say, okay, look, the test has been proven. These figs are amazing. Then let's plant and do the rest. And so digging into the roots of the fig tree often reveals the health of the rest of the vineyard. The rest of the vineyard. We think that sometimes when we're just looking at how God is in our lives, especially we as a church, we have to know that how God is working in our lives is also an indicator of how God might be working in each other's lives. We've been in a discipleship series for, months. And so when we're talking about being a church and worshiping together and having fellowship and discipling, we have to look at the fruit and the roots of one another to say, okay, how am I affecting everyone else? Leo Tolstoy said this, everybody thinks of changing humanity, but nobody thinks of changing himself. Everyone wants everyone else to change, and they don't think about, well, I could just start with me, and maybe someone seeing me change will be the result of someone else changing. That all of this change is put together. And so as we look and let God dig into our lives, we have to make sure that it's actually not just about us, but it's also about each other. When we talk about dig it and dung it, that seems like that's a 2-point sermon, but the word and is in there, so I made it a point. The word and is another category. And I want to say that it's not just a conjunction, but we're also talking about how the word and is always in between two people. So when we're talking about discipling, I want us to focus on me and you and someone else, us and God. And how do those things play out together? Dietrich Bonhoeffer says this, let him who cannot be alone beware of community. Let him who is not in community be aware of being alone. Each by itself has profound pitfalls and perils. One who wants fellowship without solitude plunges into the voids of words and feelings, and one who seeks solitude without fellowship perishes in the abyss of vanity, self-infatuation, and despair. I'm not the biggest people person. I'm just a person. But we can't just separate ourselves, and we can't just be on our lonesome. But we also can't be afraid of being alone with God and being alone with ourselves. We have to have a balance between the two, that we have to beware of both of those things, that if we seek out only being with others, then what's our life look like when we finally are left alone? and elders have left us and things have gotten sad, then it consumes us. But if we're only by ourselves, then how do we witness the lives of others that God is changing? How do we witness God's presence in other people? Because our testimony is the biggest way that we get people to God. Our testimony is the biggest way that we get others closer to God, that when they can see what he has done in our lives. Acts 2:42 says this, "And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers." That as soon as the disciples are really getting into this active ministry, they realize, okay, we actually need to devote ourselves to joining together, to teaching, to fellowship, to eating together, to celebrating God, and to praying. That's why we as a church are doing so many of these different kinds of things with corporate prayer and gatherings, that we need to make sure that we are together. See, God intends for our spiritual disciplines. So spiritual disciplines, things like prayer, service, solitude, the list goes on. That these are things that are supposed to be meant for ordinary people. A lot of times we look at this list and we think, oh, that's great for a monk that just has a vow of silence and is living by the river, and that's all he does all day. And sometimes that sounds like a dream, but unfortunately, the spiritual disciplines of God are meant for us to be doing them in our normal lives. They're for people that are in relationships with spouses, people that have siblings, friends, co-workers, people with babies, people that have to cut the grass the next day, people that have to get up early and go to work, who have the night shift. They're for people that are around people. They're essentially just for people. So that we have to be doing these things, that being a disciple of Jesus is not just about leading our ministries. It's not about just getting up here and speaking and teaching Bible studies or being the most visible Christian in the room. It's not about like going into a room and you're like, look, I've got my Bible, I've got my John 3:16 t-shirt, I've got all of these things. Look at me, I'm a Christian. It's not about that. It's really just about living an everyday life that can point someone naturally to Christ. It's about living a life where someone notices maybe there's something different about them. Maybe there's something different. And so as we pursue this and as we try to live this different life, we don't have to stand out. We just have to stand up. We just have to be living for God. That the fuel for this call to live for him is love. We just have to be loving God. That we have to let this love give to others. That disciples are made through relationships, not just programs. There are plenty of great programs out there, plenty of great Bible studies, and they can guide people to God, they sure can. But we can't just think that that's all there is. That it's all through relationships with one another, that gathering together. See, making disciples, it's not supposed to be just a project, it's supposed to be a friendship. It's supposed to be a friendship. Think about with sports going on, with the World Cup, just gather some people together, have a watch party, spend time fellowshipping. Let them see you when you're resisting anger. Let them see you when you're being nice and talking to others, when you're praying before your meal, when you're conversing and asking someone how they're truly doing, you're offering words of advice. Let them see you in an element of all of the aspects of friendship, not just, here, let me give this project. Let me come to you and we're going to meet at this time on this day and we're going to just talk about this verse. That's great to do, but not everyone needs that. Not everyone wants that. And sometimes it's just like chipping away slowly and slowly. And sometimes when we start living like that, then we have this issue where we get to this idea where it's like, well, it's only going to be worth it if they get saved. It's going to be worth it if they get saved, but that's not the way it should be. It should be, I hope they get saved because I know that they're worth it. That I want them to get saved. I want them to become a Christ follower because I know who they are and I know that they are worth it. See, discipleship is often found in ordinary moments, not extraordinary platforms. Ordinary moments. We live a lot of ordinary moments every day. Every day is just something simple. I was actually reading a Richard Scarry book to my daughter last night going through, it's busy town. It's cats and dogs and whatever. And it was about these 2 cats that have to go fishing every day for their family of 9 kittens or something like that. And and they go fishing, and then they go, and it's just everything one after another. It's just craziness. Like they rescue a little pig from drowning. Naturally, they're just swimming out in the ocean somehow. They rescue someone else. A submarine comes up. They get tipped over. There's like all of these crazy things happening to them. And then when they get home to their cat wives, they're like, "Well, what'd you do today?" And they're like, "Nothing." And they're like, "Was anything happen today?" And they're like, "Not really." And, we think sometimes that's just how life is. We've got all of these extraordinary moments, and sometimes really the day is just full of nothing. But maybe all of these ordinary moments can be extraordinary if we let God lead us in them. Maybe if we let all of these little mundane things have the presence of God over them, then maybe they will be extraordinary, and maybe it won't feel like we have anything to say when we get home. But perhaps it made a huge impact in someone else's life, and they've got something to say. See, following Jesus should change the way that we respond to everyday situations. I think that's the biggest test of a Christian, is how we respond to everything. See, bad things happen to all people, all the time. Little annoying things happen to people all the time. On the way here, I had so many people that they would just make the slowest left turn imaginable. Just the slowest turn. I was like, you want me to push? It's like they're speeding the rest of the time, and it's like, why is this one particular thing such a struggle? And it's like, okay, well, I've got to reframe my mind, and I've got to be careful with how I respond to all of these little everyday things. And then I come up to somebody, they're going a little slow. I'm like, well, I got to make sure I don't tailgate them, because what if they're coming to New Vision? I can't be riding their bumper. What if they see me turn into New Vision? They're going to be like, that church, tailgaters, terrible. And so we have to be careful with all of our little everyday situations of how we respond to them. See, the world doesn't need more Christians that are only in the name Christian. It needs disciples of Jesus whose everyday lives naturally make the name Christian worth believing in again. There's a lot of issues with the word Christian that people find. There's a lot of baggage that comes with it. And so I actually know people who they're like, oh, I'm not a Christian, I'm a Christ follower. I'm like, okay, that's great. They're both true. It's just one of them has more of a negative connotation to it. What we need is we don't need people who just have the name and the banner of Christian. We need people whose lives look like it. Whose lives look just naturally to anybody that, maybe Christians are not what I'm thinking they are. That maybe it's worth believing in again. That we have to be in tow. In tow. I was driving the other day, and I saw a car that was pulling another car, real small. And on the back window, they had written in the paint letters, in tow, T-O-W. And I was like, I saw that, and I was like, oh, well, I didn't know. It's not like the car was going backwards for no reason. Like it was pretty obvious that the car was being towed. And I looked at it, and the more I thought about that is, it should be noticeable that we are in tow with God. It should be noticeable that He is pulling us along, that we are connected. We don't need to have the letters written on the back. That it should be recognizable. And same thing when we're discipling people, that when we are following other believers, it should be noticeable when those things start becoming similar in the good ways. Clement of Rome said this, follow the saints because those who follow them will become saints. And now Clement of Rome, if you didn't know, he was an early bishop of Rome, and when he's talking about the saints, he's not talking about people that have been sainted, because Clement of Rome is actually mentioned in Philippians 4. He's like the second round of disciples after the first round. So although he never met Jesus, he was there for the first generation of church leaders after the apostles. He's got letters to the Corinthians, and it's one of the most surviving Christian writings outside of the New Testament. And so when he's saying the saints, he's not talking about, all of these people through the church that have gone through all these lives. He's talking about all the people he just witnessed change their lives radically for Jesus. He's talking about all of these disciples, all the people around him. He's talking about the sheer impact that Jesus made just in those years of his ministry. he's talking about these disciples and all these apostles who he's watched change and grow, and they were tax collectors, they were fishermen, and now they're making writings, they're speaking, they're preaching, they're healing, they're doing extraordinary things. And he's like, I want to follow them so that maybe I will be a little bit more like them. And we need to follow God so that maybe we can be a little bit more like him. That we need to be following our Savior, that he'll start chipping away and making everything look more like himself. See, the ingredients for growth when we're talking about discipleship, we're talking about being in tow with someone, is we've got to have transparent trust. We have to have truth and community. And we have to have life change accountability. I think God has a lot of accountability on us, and sometimes when we go to prayer, there's just moments where it hits you and you feel this conviction. We should feel that sometimes. But we also should have that with others. We should have people that are willing to help us be trustworthy with each other, be able to talk about what hurts us, be able to recognize each other and notice things that are changing in our lives. That we should have all of these things to help grow. And so as we dig it, and as we now we've got to dung it. I know some of you that take pictures of slides for your notes. I don't think anyone's going to take pictures of this one. To dung it. And so the first lesson that I want to give with this is that God can use everything in our lives, even the parts that stink. Even the parts that stink. And see, this was an important thing in ancient culture and in farming. So you would have your pile right outside your house. It was gross, but it was necessary because you needed it for your plants. So then when your plants were needing something, you'd go over there and you'd sprinkle it in. And so it's gross, it's nasty, it's smelly, it's all these gross things. And yet in this scripture, this visual aid, this parable, Jesus is saying, look, the vine dresser wants to dig it, and he's going to say, oh, I'm going to dung it, and then you can come back and tell me if it worked. If what worked? If putting fertilizer on? What is that doing? It's got to be doing something, right? So I think the lesson here is that the manure you're going through in your lives has a purpose. It has a purpose. And we get caught up in all of the bad things. We're caught up and we're like, man, it just smells. My life stinks. Maybe it has a purpose. Maybe it's just fertilizer for your life. C.S. Lewis said this, God whispers to us in our pleasures, he speaks in our conscience, but he shouts in our pains. It's his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. If I'm correct, I think he wrote this in The Problem with Pain, which is what he wrote after his wife died. So while he's in the middle of grieving, he comes up with this thought that says, look, I know God speaks to me in all these ways, but the time that I hear God shouting is when I'm in pain. When I hear God shouting to me, it's when I'm really going through it. When I'm going through the manure, the dung, the fertilizer, the stunk, that those are the things that are impacting and affecting us, that they are the thing causing us to grow. See, headwinds are the barriers that you face. I was reading this in a psychological magazine, and I was like, that's actually really cool. They were talking about this. They were talking about how they were interviewing all these people, these behavioral psychologists, and they were interviewing them, and they were talking about the headwinds, which are the barriers you face, but then they were talking about the tailwinds, which are the things that help you get over that barrier. And a lot of times, people had no recognition of the tailwinds. They only were paying attention to the struggles and the barriers that they had to overcome. They weren't thinking about the things in their lives that were helping boost them further. They weren't thinking about the things that were helping them go forward in life, helping their careers, helping their, their relationships, their athletics. They weren't thinking about any of that. They were only thinking about the stuff they were being affected by. And I think we do that so often too, is we're just aware of the headwind coming because that's what we're facing. We feel it, but we don't feel it when it's blowing the other direction. But if you start to zoom out, and you start to really pay attention, that if you looked at it from an aerial view, it's easier to see these tailwinds. It's easier to see the things that God is pushing. And see, we naturally notice headwinds, but we often overlook God's tailwinds. That maybe we're just going the wrong direction. Maybe we're just unaware of what God is doing in our lives. In 2 Corinthians 12, it says this, "But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me for the sake of Christ. Then I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. He says, my grace is sufficient. And so this power is made perfect in weakness, and so we have to be able to recognize what these weaknesses are and recognize that God is in them. Recognize that God is doing these things. So that when we talk about headwinds and tailwinds, I want to say that the God who made the winds can make them go in any direction. He can make them go in any direction. That what you thought was a barrier might just be a boost. What you thought you were facing that was a struggle, and you're saying, God, why am I going through this? Why me? Why not everyone else? Why is this happening to me? What did I do? And God says, well, maybe I am trying to give you a boost. Maybe I'm trying to draw you closer to me, that I'm trying to give you growth. I'm trying to fertilize your life. Isaiah 57:20 says, but the wicked are like the tossing sea, for it cannot be quiet, and its waters toss up mire and mud. That the wicked are just tossing of the sea. It can't be quiet. And Richard J. Foster has a quote on this that I like. It says, the sea does not need to do anything special to produce mire and dirt. It's the result of its natural motions. It's just what happens naturally. This is also true of us when we are under the condition of sin. The natural motion of our lives produce mire and dirt. Sin is part of the internal structure to our lives. No special effort is needed to produce it. You don't have to work hard to sin. You don't have to work hard to find dirt in your life. All these things are natural to us because that's the life of sin that we were born into. And so when we talk about God fertilizing our lives, we have to make sure that we can separate the things that are our own issues and the things that are God's provision, God's fertilizer. We have to know if it's dung or dumb. Is it dung that's something that God is using to fertilize my faith, or is it just something I did stupidly in disobedience? Is it dung or dumb? We have to come to God and say, God, please guide me in this. And don't get me wrong, God can work anything in your life for good. So even if you are a little dumb and you do something that's bad, you give a little sin, you do something that just wrecks your life, God says, okay, I'm going to use it, but you probably you might have to go through something for it. Because that's just what you put on yourself. But God says, I can still use it. I can still mold you. I can still let you become more like me. I can let this shine for you. But we have to try to stay away from that. We have to say, okay, God, I'm doing everything right. I'm being good for you. Why is this happening to me? And God is just saying, well, I'm just trying to fertilize your faith a little. That the vine dresser wouldn't fertilize someone else's tree. He fertilizes the tree that he has to take care of. And so God is watching over you, the one that he's trying to take care of. You don't need to be meddling in the roots of other people's lives, but you need to be looking at how you can grow your own relationship with God. How you can grow your own relationship with God, that you have to grow with him. And part of growing requires the relationship. I keep saying that because information alone does not guarantee transformation. You can read the whole Bible, you can know every single thing about it, but if you don't put it onto your heart and into your life, then what does it mean? Information alone does not guarantee transformation. You have to let it shape you and mold you. And when you do that, it's because you actually know God. See, when you know someone, you can spot them in a crowd. We did a fundraiser a few months ago, and a friend of mine, he was out in the middle of everything, but it's like, I know who to look for. So it's like I turn, boom, there he is. Because I know that person. If I didn't know him, I wouldn't be able to recognize him. Have you ever met with someone in person, but you didn't know them? And you're just like, hey, I'm here. I'm by the door. Like, where are you? And he's like, I'm by the door too. The front door, the back door, and so you have to actually know the person so that you can help recognize them, so you can spot them in a crowd. And this is the same true when we talk about the fertilizer and the dung in our lives, is that we should strive to recognize Jesus in those circumstances. That if we know him, we can find him. That if we know him, we can see where he's playing in this life. We can see, okay, I'm going through this and I'm wondering, where is God? Where is God? God is in the midst of it. God is right in the middle of the issue. And you can look and find, okay, now how does this affect me? See, recognizing the fertilizer in your life can help how you respond to it. If you can recognize it, then it can kind of help you shape up and figure out how to respond, because sometimes if something bad's happening to you and you just think it's a bad thing, you're just going to be grouchy, you're going to be mad, you're going to be angry. But if you start reframing it as something purposeful from God, then it's like, okay, all right, we can do this. We can move forward. I've been reading a lot about a lot of the World Cup athletes, and I was reading about all these soccer players with these devotionals, and every single one of them tend to have this like identity problem where they were Christians, but before they were Christians, they were soccer players, and they were playing, and they're doing well, and then they got hurt, and they suddenly had no idea what to do with their life. That their identity was purely in just the sport and just being a player. And then they would come back to God, and they started recognizing, okay, God is using me as a soccer player. Not that I am a soccer player, but that I am a follower of God. And so they would get hurt, and then they would just completely forget about everything in their lives. But then as they started to grow their faith, they started to improve their health. They were able to get back in the game. Then they started becoming a testimony to people, and people started questioning on the team, how they were doing, dealing with this breaking news that they couldn't play anymore. How are they doing that they finally made it to the next league? How are they doing in all these kinds of ways? That recognizing it can help us know how to respond to it. See, people may never attend your Bible study. They may never hear you preach or watch you lead a ministry, but they will watch how you respond to ordinary life. Those everyday responses are your greatest opportunity to make disciples. Your everyday response is the greatest time that we all go through things, but if we have our head up high when we're going through something, then it's a testimony in itself. So instead of asking, why is this happening? Try asking, how is God using this to help me bear fruit? Why is this happening? It's like, okay, there's so many different reasons. Sometimes we still don't know the answer why. You read the book of Job, it doesn't even truly give you an answer why. Everyone gives all these opinions, and God just says, don't I know everything? And that's the end of it. That's the answer. And so God knows everything, and we come to him and we say, okay, God, how are you helping me bear fruit? See, the fertilizer in your life, it won't smell forever. It's eventually nourishment. That when you're planting a tree and you're throwing all this stuff, it's a gross, messy, disgusting process. But goodness, what would our gardens be like if it always smelled? Eventually, we digest it. Eventually, it's nourishment. Sometimes the hardest seasons in our life aren't punishment. Sometimes they're just fertilizer. Sometimes they're just fertilizer to help us grow. Things that seem unpleasant today may become what produces tomorrow's fruit. That tomorrow's fruit comes because of the unpleasant stuff we go through today. The band can go ahead and start coming up. But when we read the passage, he doesn't say, come back tomorrow. He doesn't say, come back next month after the fertilizer's been there. He just says, give me a year. Give me an entire growing season. Give me an entire year of heat waves and droughts and extra wind and extra rain and all of these different elements that are going to come into our life. Give me that amount of time, and then come and see how it's affected this plant. Then come and see how this fig tree has grown. Don't just give me tomorrow, but give me a longer amount of time, that sometimes it may not produce tomorrow's fruit. It may be a year from now. It may be 5 years from now. But the important thing is that it's actually doing something to your roots. That you're letting God dig you and dung you. That you're letting him grow you. See, we've got to say, God, search me and change me. We have to let God use us to change others. We have to let God use our circumstances for change too. When we say we're going to give God everything, it's not just the little parts of me that I want to give him. It's supposed to be everything. That everything being given to God is my circumstances, my problems, my good times, my bad. Because gardening is never clean. It requires work, and it requires waiting. Discipleship and sanctification is the exact same. We can't expect it to stay neat. When we're discipling someone, we start getting in this mind like, okay, we're going to go get Chick-fil-A and fellowship. And then we're going to go to a Bible study, and we're going to do that. And then we're going to go, and we're going to do all these things, and they're going to accept God. And then they're going to start discipling someone. Somewhere in the midst of that, there's going to be some dirt. There's going to be some issues where, something happens in their life and they go all the way backwards and question everything. Something happens in their life and they go forward and they're praising, and then something happens to our lives and we're like, I don't deserve to be teaching and guiding anyone. And it just keeps going back and forth. And so discipleship and sanctification, where we become more and more like God, it's never going to be completely clean. It's going to be a little messy sometimes. We have to expect that and know that God has a purpose in all of it. John 15, 1-4 says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that bears fruit, he prunes it so that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Remain in me and I in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, but must remain in the vine, so neither can you unless you remain in me. That we've got to abide with God. We have to remain in him. And we read this verse. What happened in the previous parable? It's the vine dresser who steps up and says, oh, hold on. Don't cut this tree down. Give me some more time. In this passage, Jesus is saying, my God, my Father is the vine dresser. He's the one giving you this second chance. He's the one that is trying to help you grow, and he's going to help you bear fruit. And even when you are bearing fruit and you think everything's great and you're a great disciple of God, he says, what am I going to do? I'm going to prune it so that you bear more fruit. And so this pruning in our life, it affects us. It hits us all the time. We have to know that it's for a good purpose. Looking back at the original passage, we see he began telling the parable. A man had a fig tree which had been planted in his vineyard, and he came looking for fruit on it and did not find any. And he said, look, for 3 years I've come looking for fruit on this fig tree without finding any. Cut it down. Why does it even use up the ground? But he answered and said to him, Sir, leave it alone. For this year too, until I dig around it and put in fertilizer. And if it bears fruit next year, fine, but if not, cut it down. You notice that this story here ends before we even learn the outcome. That Jesus doesn't continue the parable and say, okay, I came back a year later, all the figs were there, best figs I ever had, a couple of them had wasps in them. He doesn't say anything. It just ends right there. And I think it's purposeful because many of us are still living in the middle of our story. We are still in the middle of the digging and fertilization season. We are still being searched. We are still going through the stink. We are still dealing with this, but God gives us hope that the story's not yet done in your life, that these things are still helping you grow. Also, I want to point out, he said, Sir, leave it alone. That phrase, leave it alone, is aphiemi in Greek. Aphiemi. That phrase can mean to send away, can mean to leave it alone. It can mean to permit, to abandon, and it can also mean to forgive. That aphiemi is the same word they used when the disciples left their nets to follow God. They aphiemi the nets. They left them. It's the same word they use when in the Lord's Prayer he says, forgive us of our sins as we forgive others. Aphiemi, forgive us, Lord. That when we're not bearing fruit and they want us to cut us down, the Lord gives us another moment to say, God, forgive them. Let us fertilize them. Let God change you. Let God change us, and let God use every bit of it, even when it stinks, even when we don't want to deal with our circumstances. When we leave it alone, we let God say, forgive us. We have to come to him. We have to let him dig it and dunk it. Let's pray together. Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for who you are. We thank you that you forgive us. God, forgive us now of our sins. Forgive us now of the things that we have forgotten to do. For all the things that make us less like you, forgive us of those, Lord. And draw us closer to you. Search our hearts. Dig into our lives. Expose our roots. Make sure that they're where they need to be. That there's nothing in the way of our growth. God, be with us in our fellowship, in our relationships. Draw us closer to each other and closer to you. And God, be with us in our circumstances. Lord, sometimes things in our lives, they just stink, and we don't want them to be there. We don't want to deal with it. But Lord, we know that you are doing a new thing. We know that all things work together for your purpose. And God, I pray that they will fertilize our lives and that we will recognize you in our circumstances and that we will recognize that you are doing something in our life. Help us bear fruit. Let our fruit show our roots. And let our lives be an indicator of who you are, what you've done for us, and what it means to follow you. We love you, Lord, and we thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about us, please visit our website at newvisionc.com and our socials at New Vision Church and NVC Next Gen. Just look for the round broken V logo and we'll see you soon. God bless.